Okay, anyway, I am Judy Donahue of the program chair. Tonight's very, very important presentation is part of an ongoing Making Democracy Work program. It is titled Voting Rights and Legislative Changes. Updating us tonight is our Midland League President, Kim Stanke. Kim?
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Kim Stanke, President of the League of Women Voters of the Midland Area, and I am pleased to present this update on the changing status of voting rights initiatives and legislation in Michigan. Please note that this presentation is being recorded. The presentation is an educational program with funds provided from the League of Women Voters of Michigan's Education Fund. It does not advocate action on the materials provided. The PowerPoint is updated as needed because voting rights in Michigan are in a state of flux. So we encourage you to keep checking your trusted sources of information, including the League of Women Voters Michigan's website. We encourage you to use the chat room to post any questions you have. And Wallen, another member of the League, our League board, will be assisting with the Q&A at the end of the presentation. But please note that throughout the event, you will be muted. The purpose of the League of Women Voters Education Fund is to provide nonpartisan information about candidates and ballot issues to Michigan voters, to provide information about the mechanics of registering and voting, and to encourage citizens to participate in civic life and provide to them nonpartisan information about important ballot issues. So now let's begin. 2018 was the first election after the passage of Proposal 3, which amended our state constitution, and it may have been a factor in the significant increase in voter turnout. This slide highlights the information regarding eligibility and registering to vote. And while I don't want to go into the actual details, I would refer you to the one of 3 attachments to the invitation that you received. It is a 2-page document that has current voting laws in Michigan on the front and proposed changes to Michigan laws on the back. And it clearly states the requirements for you to be able to both register and to vote. Moving from registration to vote to the rights you have to vote before Election Day, while I want to focus on the absentee ballot, I want to make sure everybody understands what your rights are in terms of voting prior to the election. In addition to requesting an absentee ballot through an application, you can also vote in person at your clerk's office or a satellite office before Election Day. There are 40 days prior to the election when you'll be able to vote. You can also go to your clerk's office to register to vote, request an absentee ballot to vote, and return it all in one visit. If you're not sure if you've registered, you can go to www.mi.gov/vote. And with that, I would refer you to the second handout that was sent along with the invitation. It's called The Process for Getting on the Permanent Absentee Ballot List. And the primary reason for doing so is it makes it easier to vote to apply for an absentee ballot application. And I won't go into the details, but I want to remind you that the process for voting absentee is two-step. The first is to get an application to register or to vote. And then the second is to make sure that you actually get your ballot and you request your ballot and vote. Polls are open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on the day of. And if you have an ID that is sufficient, otherwise you have to sign an affidavit. Absentee ballots must be submitted to the clerk or put in the drop box by 8 p.m. Moving on to the next, in 2020, the Michigan presidential election status. You can see there that we had a close election for president in Michigan, resulting in a concern in the outcome of some voters. This led to the most extensive post-election audits of the general election in Michigan's history. It should be noted that running of elections is a local responsibility held by Michigan's 1,520 city and township clerks, along with their staff, volunteers, and poll workers, election inspectors that they have hired to work in polling places and perform other election functions. Auditing of elections, which includes review of the city and township clerks who ran the elections, is performed by county and state officials. There were also numerous court cases that found no evidence of voter fraud, and the Senate Oversight Election Committee, chaired by Senator Ed McBroom, a Republican, released a report that said the election was safe and secure. I would move to the third handout that was part of our information to you on the link. And it showed that the officer of the Auditor General confirmed the success of Michigan's post-election audits. Nevertheless, the reaction to the 2020 election resulted in the introduction of over 100 bills in the Michigan House of Representatives and a 39-bill package introduced in the Michigan Senate. Please note that the Senate bills add restrictions to registering to vote. They also remove the administration and certification of elections from the control of the Secretary of State, which has the potential to make the counting of ballots a partisan process. The next slide shows the process by which the proposed bills become law. Please note, it is a different process than the citizens-initiated laws and constitutional amendments, which are now being generated. Note that the governor, if the governor elects to veto rather than sign the bills, the House and Senate can override the veto with a 2/3 majority. The next slide, you can see the status of the bills to change election laws. Senate Elections Committee started hearings back in April of 21 and have completed testimony on the 39 bills that passed through the Senate. Most bills are still in committee, with only 12 bills having moved forward, of which 4 bills have been vetoed by the governor. As it relates to the veto of election bills on the next slide, the governor vetoed some of the election bills over concerns they could impede citizens' guaranteed right to vote. Senate Bill 303, which was vetoed, affects the absentee ballot process as it requires a voter to either call, write, or show up at a clerk's office to receive an application for an absentee ballot, and prohibits in-kind support of elections, which prevents groups like the League of Women Voters from volunteering our time to register voters and help administer elections. The following slide confirms some of the sources that you can go to independently, whether it be the legislature, either the House or the Senate, in addition to the League of Women Voters of Michigan site, to gain more information on these issues. And finally, what can you do? You can stay informed. And I would note to you that in addition to the League of Women Voters of Michigan site, you can also go onto the website that allows you to see information about the 2020 election and its safe and secure and fair outcome. Our next section has to do with petitions and constitutional amendments. We are only covering one citizen-initiated petition and one constitutional amendment in this presentation, but there is more than a dozen such initiatives that have been filed. And I'm going to start with the citizens-initiated petitions. A citizens-initiated law allows citizens to create laws. These petitions do not necessarily go on the ballot for a vote by the voters. And in some cases, these petitions would not require the signature of the governor. More specifically, I want to review with you the actual definitions. A citizens-initiated law allows citizens to pass a law that can circumvent the governor and avoid a vote of the people. These laws can be changed by the legislature. It requires slightly over 340,000 ballot signatures on petitions that must be submitted by June 1st this year and verified by the Michigan Board of Canvassers. Then the legislature can enact the law or place it on the next general ballot. As it relates to citizen-initiated constitutional amendment, it allows citizens to amend the Constitution, but it must be done by the vote of the people. This requires 425,000, just slightly over, and those petitions must be submitted by July 11th of this year and verified by the Michigan Board of Canvassers. Then the people vote on it at the next general election. This next slide has to do with the citizens petitions law and how it gets passed, different from a regular legislative law. Citizens of Michigan may initiate legislation as indirectly initiated state statutes. For statutes, if the petition receives enough ballot signatures, then the state legislature has 40 days to adopt or reject the proposal. If the legislature rejects the law, then the measure is placed on the next general ballot. If it has an appropriation, there can be no referendum on the law. If the legislature approves it, it becomes law 90 days later. The initiated law can be amended by the legislature after adopted through regular legislative process, but it must be signed by the governor. The Secure My Vote, one of the groups putting forward a petition, has an appropriation, so there can be no referendum. We don't know when the initiative would go into effect. Once the signatures are submitted and verified, the legislature can approve the law and it takes effect 90 days after that. Going a little further, let us cover the proposals that are in the Secure Michigan Vote proposal. On September 2nd, Secure Michigan Vote submitted an initiative for approval prior to beginning to collect signatures. Subsequently, the Board of Canvassers approved the form and the petitions are now being circulated. The Secure My Vote legislation, if made law, would mandate that people disclose their partial social security numbers when registering to vote. It would restrict options for registered voters to verify their identity. It requires voters applying for an absentee ballot to include their driver's license or state ID number or the last 4 digits of their social security number on their application. It prohibits election officials from sending or providing an absentee ballot application unless they're asked for it. Currently, clerks can mail applications to those on the permanent application list and have applications available on websites. Further, it bans charitable contributions, including volunteer time and donated space to help administer elections. Drop boxes close at 8 p.m. on election day. That is not a change. It mandates offices be open 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. for the 5 weekdays leading up to the election to accept ballots, or that drop boxes be made available for return ballots. That is a new requirement. Further, it establishes a voter access fund and allocates $3 million for 1 year to provide free voter identification for those who declare need. And that is the appropriation that we spoke of earlier. And therefore, it would allow the legislature to adopt the legislation without a vote of the people. Moving on, the constitutional petition. On January 31, Promote the Vote submitted a constitutional amendment for approval prior to beginning to collect signatures. This is a coalition of voting rights groups, including the League of Women Voters of Michigan. The Michigan Board of Canvassers recently approved the revised format and summary of the petition, and the petitions are now being printed. And today I can update you that the collection of signatures will begin on April 1st. This timeline you see on this slide provides a visual of the constitutional amendment process. The key feature of a constitutional amendment is that it must be presented as a ballot for the voters of Michigan to determine if the amendment is approved, not a vote by the legislature. Also, as previously noted, it requires more signatures than a citizen-initiated petition to become a ballot on the next general election. More specifics about this constitutional amendment: it ensures that voters can vote free from harassment, intimidation, and interference. It allows the ballots of military and overseas voters to be counted if they are postmarked on election day and received within 6 days of the election. It provides access to the state funding for postage on absentee applications and ballots, security of drop boxes, and absentee ballot tracking that alerts voters if there is an issue with their ballot and how to fix it. And finally, allows voters to request an absentee ballot application be mailed to them for all future elections without having to request an application each time, all of which are not currently in the Constitution. Further, it allows voters to prove their identity when voting in person by showing a photo ID or signing a legal document. When voting by mail, voters must provide their signature, which is then verified by the election officials. It requires election audits to be conducted in public by state and county election officials based on methods established prior to each election. It also makes clear that the legislature or political parties play no role in the voter certification, and that boards of county canvassers have a clear and ministerial duty to certify election returns received by municipal clerks. It provides a minimum of 9 days of early voting for 8 hours per day before statewide elections versus the 5 days which is proposed in the Secure by Michigan petition. It preserves the authority of local government to accept publicly disclosed charitable donations and in-kind donations to assure elections are safe and secure. With that, I would close with stating that we should never underestimate our right to vote. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ann Wallen and ask her to give you some updates on specifics that relate to the Midland area.
Thanks, Kim. So perhaps this is better advertised as my soapbox. First of all, I would encourage everybody to check their voter registration as we get closer to the election. There are a number of reasons why people end up registered someplace other than what they thought, and could have been taken off the voter rolls. The Board of Canvassers just cleaned up the voter rolls. So please check and make sure that you're registered. And secondly, that'll also tell you where you vote. In the city of Midland, I know there are a number of changes coming to polling locations. My polling location is changing. So that'll be a good thing to get sorted out in advance so you're not surprised if you like to go vote at the polls. A reminder, this is a well-versed group in terms of voting rights, but anyone can vote absentee now since the passage of Proposal 3 in 2018, and that anyone can register to vote up to and including Election Day. As you get closer within that 14-day window, you need to do it at the clerk. And while you may be well-versed in a lot of these nuances in voting rights and the logistics of it, your family and friends may not be. So please make sure you share that with family and friends, maybe people who don't vote as frequently or haven't voted many times, to make sure that everybody understands how and where they can vote. And with that, the first question that came in, Kim, was will county clerks be allowed to count absentee votes prior to Election Day?
And I guess my response is, I'm not sure that's been decided. There is some conversation around that. I know the clerks are pushing for it, but I don't know that there has been any definitive decision on whether they're going to be allowed to do so.
There was a comment that most of the ward boundaries have been changed. There have also been some nuances, I think, to some of the precincts. The precinct numbering is wildly different. So a great point from Carol, just to get up to speed. You may have been moved into a different ward and have a different county commissioner. What are Midland's plans for Save the Vote? And Save the Vote's not something I'm familiar with, or I'd help you out, Kim.
I'm not. I would ask the questioner to give me a little more detail.
Questioner is typing. So just a reminder that we're taking questions via the chat feature, which should be, at least on my computer, it's at the bottom bar. What are Midland's plans for Promote the Vote?
What I can tell you is that based on the information I'm receiving for the League of Women Voters of Michigan, that we are actively starting to ramp up requests to get people that will be willing to help get signatures. And the actual start date for getting signatures is April 1st. So all of you that are members will be getting information in the next few days on the process that we're going to follow. But clearly we are going to be engaged in this effort to get those $425,000 votes. And there are some professionals that are involved, as I understand, with this process. And I know that there are a lot of groups that are going to be helping us. But we here in the Midland League are going to be also working with some of our members to try to make sure we help get out and get those signatures. Does that answer the question?
And I guess I would just add, so that people understand, Promote the Vote 2022, not the same as Promote the Vote 2018, is a coalition of a number of voting rights groups, the League of Women Voters being one of those. So it's possible in the Midland area that you will encounter somebody from a, let's say, a supportive organization that's part of that coalition to sign a petition. And there's a comment, I know that other groups like Voters Not Politicians are already organizing and hope to coordinate with them so as not to duplicate. I think that's a great comment. My understanding is Voters Not Politicians will have petitions available for the field as of this weekend. I think I also would urge you not to get too concerned about duplicating. Do try and keep track of which petitions you've signed, because there are so many that are in the field at one time this election season. But what's really important is to get the signatures. I know there's going to be a concerted effort for Promote the Vote 2022 to eliminate duplicate signatures from petitions before they go to the Board of Canvassers, so that when they pull that sample, they get an appropriate level of acceptable signatures. And encourage your friends and family and educate them too. This, I find, an incredibly confusing petition initiative season, and we haven't really even gotten started. So I think there's a lot of voter education that we all can do.
And I know that we're going to be involved in voter registration. This is important to engage young people. This is an extremely important election in the history of this state, probably the country. And so we really want to make sure that people have the facts. Our vote411.org is going to be updated and with information on the primaries as well as the general election. And so it's all about educating people on what is available to them in terms of information on candidates. And we hope to support all of that.
There is a question, how many petitions are going to be out that the League of Women Voters is trying to get signed? I think how many initiatives are out there that the League of Women Voters is going to be actively circulating petitions for? If I could reword
Our
it.
main concern right now is the Promote the Vote, of which the League of Women Voters is one of the sponsors. That is for us a very big deal. If we are not allowed to hold voter registration drives because of this issue, it could really hamper our ability. This is what the League has always represented, is that we want to sign people up to register to vote. So we're really committed to being able to make sure that people understand that the Promote the Vote will ensure in the Constitution our right to be able to help our clerks and our townships be able to register people to vote.
Any other questions? I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat right now, Kim.
Okay. If not, I want to thank everybody tonight. And as always, if you have any questions, you can direct them to our website or to call any of us that you know directly for more information.
And I guess I would add to Kim's comments that she said earlier, this is a very busy and very fluid election season. And I don't expect that it's going to get any more stable as we move forward, at least not for a while. So stay tuned, stay close to your sources like the League of Women Voters Michigan.org, as well as other trusted news sources that you have. And Judy Donahue?
Yeah, there was a question that came on after you kind of were wrapping up. It says, is the League of Women Voters going to have any kind of educational programming for the public to help the community understand? And that was my question too, whether the clarification on this has got to be great. We've got to go out of our way or it's going to be mass confusion. So Kim, what do you see?
What I envision is we're going to come up with something that we can do, whether it's through media, whether it's through separate additional programming, but we are going to take our guidance from the League of Women Voters of Michigan, but we are going to try to do things to simplify the process, to help educate people. And we know that there's a primary coming up soon, and we know that we've got to do a lot to get ready for that. So yes, we are committed to making sure we can simplify the process for the voters of the Midland area.
And perhaps our final question is it possible to get a copy of the slides?
Yeah. Let us know.
Okay, I have that name.
And can I just say, we really need every member's help on this. This is not something we can sit back on and say, oh, well, the younger people can do it or this or that. We need to do it.
Correct. And I was at the president's meeting yesterday, so I'm hoping to get some more guidance on the details on how we're going to be involved in the process of collecting signatures. And as soon as I get that information, it will be passed along, and helping all the other groups here in Midland and in Michigan do what we can do to get the signatures that are required to ensure that we can put this in the Constitution once and for all to make sure that the right to vote is secure.
And I think that's it, Kim.
All right. Thank you, everybody, and be safe. And I guess my final message is we've learned from what's going on in the world that we cannot take our right to vote for granted. So thank you for your emphasis and your encouragement and your support for everything we do.